Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about I'm a Virgo, Season 1, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So that opening of the episode, the bear stuff, it didn't go the direction I thought it was going to go, because we were introduced to Bear when he was like spinning out in the middle of all those cars. I thought what the story was going to end up being is like, oh, all this stuff that revolved around Cootie, that we see a different side of it from Bear's perspective of like, right, we saw like, okay, we know Bear, Scat, Scat, Jones and Felix in the first episode where they were Cootie. So I thought like, oh, like Bear kind of got upshown by them there. Then there was the whole club situation where him and his boys try to fight Cootie and everything, right? So I thought we were going to get that. I even started thinking too much ahead where I was like, oh, are we going to find out the guy that was banging on her door last episode after when Cootie and Flora had hooked up? I was like, oh, we're going to find out that was Bear. Is he the dude she kind of dumped just to be with Cootie? She made the whole point of like, oh, I get bored easily. Like I said, I started running with that immediately, especially when he woke up in the sheets. I was like, oh my god, is that what this is going to be about? But no, the episode went completely not where I was expecting. And then he can't get out of the sheets. I'm like, what the hell? And then he's small. I'm like, what? I was like, is you on some Ant-Man stuff? But he's stuck that way. But he's still like, yo, I'm running this place like the barbecue or whatever they're having. But then he notices it's not just him. It's an entire neighborhood. It's been shrunk like this. And I think because obviously there's a movie called Downsizing, I think it's called that, with Matt Damon. Because I forgot I think I was listening to a podcast recently where someone had referenced this particular movie. I just don't remember what podcast it was. It was something that I was reading or listening to something recently that referenced that, and I just can't remember what it was off the top of my head. But either way, I think because I had that movie in my mind at this point in time, like it kind of reminds me of that. Like I've never seen the movie, but I remember the trailer and the premise behind it. So I wondered, is it supposed to be kind of like downsizing is good in that movie? I don't know what at least the context of like the trailers and stuff, because I think the movie is actually not as like fun and funny as like the trailers kind of made it to be. It's actually a lot more serious and has a darker element to it. But like I think this is supposed to be maybe a flip on that of like maybe they're downsizing these people to kind of get them out of their homes, because right, you've been downsized. Like it's already like the lower bottoms, it's already the community and town that it is, that I think it ends up. And it's because the way Bear talks about it, it's like, right, they want to act like we're a gang. All I've ever done is try to rep. I've always said the bottoms wherever I go, no matter what I do, because I'm trying to rep my community, because that's what we are. We are a community. We are in this together, you know? And so they're kind of being, I think, pushed out, or, now it's like, not only were you shrunk down, now you won't be able to like work and pay for your homes and stuff. And so it's, I guess, a effed up way to buy them out of their neighborhoods. I'm sure it's like a commentary on, I don't know necessarily gentrifying a neighborhood, but pricing people out of their neighborhood and just like raising the prices. And obviously, just kind of like with the capitalistic crisis of capitalism that Jones was talking about last episode. The price of living goes up, but you're not getting paid as much, and it doesn't equate necessarily. So like, I'm wondering, is it supposed to kind of be like that? And like I said, they're kind of getting priced out of their own homes and stuff and not being able to keep up, especially, but now it's like physically represented in the fact that they were shrunk down, because it seems like that might end up connecting with the overarching plot of like everything that Jones is fighting, plus the whole, which also ties into the power company stuff with their lights losing power and all that. It feels like that all those storyline elements seem like they might all end up being connected. And then you also have Cootie's side of things, which we find out the aftermath of his circumstances after the hero dragged him away last episode, that he's on house arrest, 120 days of house arrest. And his mom is talking about how much that's going to affect him. And even the fact is that, right, in the news, they are painting him as the villain. I even love that news report where we had the two people going back and forth. One of those people, I kept being like, oh, I recognize his actor. It's Moshe. Is it Casher? I'm probably going to butcher his last name. But I was like, I couldn't remember his name. I had to look it up at first because I was like, I know who you are. It's just that funny thing of like, oh, I know you because like, oh, like, I know you as someone else's significant other. Like, I know what you do. I know you as a comedian, an actor, and like a writer. But I couldn't remember his name. All I could remember is like, oh, he's Natasha Leggero's husband. That's how I like that was I just I thought it's funny, but I love the bit where it's just kind of like right the effed up thing of like right you're asking like the hero dragged him away in chains, like what about handcuffs? And it's like, well, the fact of the matter is the reason why that had to be done is because there is no prison built just house someone like that, so that's why he's on house arrest. But then it's the whole situation of like, oh, like yeah, the Thwomp Monster. It's like not Thwomp Monster, it's Twomp Monster, Dick. Twomp Monster. He's like, I said Twomp Monster. He's like, do you know how they say 20 in the streets? Of course you don't. He's like, I would know because I'm in the streets. I was like, shut up, dude. I love it. But yeah, it's like all these people reporting on him about certain things. And I love like once again, the absurdness of it, of like, right, people are having, like, I mean, I guess it's real, but because it can have real world applications, but I guess it's supposed to be a representation of the fear mongering of like, hey, painting him as this villain, as this scary person. But like, there was that news report at one point in time where it's like, the woman's like, oh my God, the things he did to me in my dreams. And the guy was like, yeah, he could it is like the legitimate fear of, hey, he could pick me up and rip me in half and have my spinal cord waving. So it's like, wild imagery, but it's like understandable but that's the whole point, like, which it's like that is a real thing of creating this boogeyman, this thing that you have to fear. And because he tried to tell his mom, like, don't worry about it, I still got these billboards, I got this and that, people love me, that's just the TV. But the TV can have that effect on, like, right, when you are being force fed a certain thing, whether it's on TV, whether it's online, how that can like lead people down a rabbit hole of you kind of staying in this bubble, and this circulation of stuff can start feeding into your mind, and you could start believing something that's so crazy and outlandish. I mean, to be fair, it is a like 13-foot person, but like how they applied that, and which also plays into the way that the world works, interesting enough, where it's like TV reflects, but I mean it's also a unified thing against Cootie, but it's like TV does apply to real world, and so immediately in the time frame when he's like stuck on house arrest, there's like a police show drama about like, hey, this kid, his parents didn't raise him right. They should have sent him down the college route rather than the scamming and carjacking. And I love that it ends with the cops just like shoving the hot dogs in their mouth. And it's like, oh, here's his girlfriend. It's like, yeah, we know that he's being abusive towards you. She's like, my baby would never hurt me. I fell. And so like, trying to paint that narrative. And then there's home securities that are like, hey, we can protect you from giants, painting him in this very negative light. Like I said, it's a unified effort to demonize him, once again, to make him the boogeyman, and paint him as this villain, as something he's not. Even misinterpreting like, oh, he wrote scat. This was meant to be interpreted as scat, or else, like get away, or else, even though it's like, no, it's referencing the guy, his friend that died, which all this stuff talks about the young men that died, but they never really talk about scat by name. But like that, once again, it's just, it's all meant to be to further this narrative about and create this fear mongering amongst people by making him the villain, to make him the monster, the thing he thought, because he was so sure, like, right, like people aren't going to believe that, but it's like, no, you get sucked up into a narrative that's created, especially because he's so isolated right now because, well, he hasn't been around Jones because Jones has been in her fight. He's been around Felix, but Felix is still in his feelings, understandably, and he's lashing out because he's blaming himself. It's like, yo, if my car was better, if I fixed my car up better, I could have gotten him there faster, got him to the the hospital faster. But instead, what was I doing? I was hanging out looking after your dumbass, and putting that on Cootie, especially because it doesn't help when Cootie's looking at the whole thing with Scat and saying like there's kind of a silver lining to it, where it's just like, right, life, like dying doesn't stop life from happening, because it's like a thing of like, yeah, you might mourn, but it's still like life goes on. People go to work, they just live their lives, they fall in love. And he had talked about kind of like, rather than kind of like the infiniteness of death, it's just kind of like more so like the life after, which almost is kind of poetic about the whole snow, like, oh, the snow falls on those who are gone, but also those who basically survive us, who live on after us. And there was a parallel Cootie was kind of making in that regard. But obviously Felix is not in the mood to hear that. Yeah, I'm glad Scat's death could like give you something philosophical like that to kind of chomp down on. And it's just like interesting. And it, just once again, like Felix is in his feelings, understandably. He's still mourning, like it's still a fresh enough wound. I'm sure it doesn't I mean, I didn't talk about it last episode, but because I forgot, he kind of went at Jones where it's like, yeah, a friend just died, but here you are taking advantage of it, using him as like your platform to boost you up in all of this. And so I'm sure Jones in the papers and stuff like that, like her, and not just the papers, but on TV and stuff, like I'm sure that doesn't help. And Felix is lashing out because he's also like mad at him. So it's not their fault. It is just sadly a system of situations that played out to Scott's death. It's more about the systemic issues and the system itself rather than any of their faults, But like, despite Cootie's like quote unquote isolation, he is still with he has Flora kicking it with him, but the problem is it's like, yeah, when you're around, which I don't know if that's supposed to be like a wink and commentary on well, I mean, just in general, like being in house arrest was the same thing as being in prison, because it's like, right, it's isolating and it can drive you a little crazy when you're locked up for long periods of time like that. But I'm sure it might also be like a little bit of a commentary on lockdown, especially like what kind of effect lockdown had on couples, especially newer couples, where it's like, oh, cool, we've been dating for a little while, because at that point they had been dating for like 2 months, but because it was like 50 some days into Cootie's like his house arrest. So it's like at that point in that montage, it was like, yeah, that was kind of like 2 months roughly ish into their relationship. So it's kind of a trying thing where it's like, right, the littlest things start like annoying you, because apparently she would kind of smack her lips around. That might be a thing of, that might be like, she doesn't take notice of it, but he started fixating on it too much because she was the only person he was really interacting with. Because like I said, I don't think Felix came around anymore, neither did Jones, and you're not able to go out and hang out with people. It's like, right, like I like that we're spending time together, but it's just like you around someone that much, you start like their little habits start annoying you. And for her, she was like, "Yo, I like your balls. I like playing with them," which I was like, I wasn't expecting that line, but she's like, "I don't want to smell them all the way over here." Because he had let one rip in front of her just because he was being super passive aggressive about it. Because rather than telling her like, hey, like that is kind of annoying, it's like any other time you wouldn't been around her enough to really notice that, because it's still early days in your relationship. But she wants to stick it out with you because she likes him a lot. And it's so interesting because he was scared of her getting bored of him, but not necessarily he's bored of her, but it's just like it's that honeymoon phase kind of wore out a lot faster because we were around each other all the time. Like, only time she probably left is when she went to go to work. So I'm curious how the Bing Bang situation affects her, because a lot of people in Jones, like, coalition, I think what might be the right word. Her coalition is they are getting hired at these places that are all connected, and then like going on strike and kind of screwing these companies over. Once again, kind of cutting into their bottom lines. And, it's like, right, you don't make any profit until you change things for how you're operating and making things better for everyone. So I should also talk about that cartoon. Once again, Parking Tickets. This time it was about a baby. And I love that line from that whole situation where it's like the baby's like, I want my gifts. And it's like, basically like, I'm the one responsible for all this. I love that line specifically. I've been good, sly. I'm going to butcher it. I was like, the wolf to the sheep, the snake to the charmer. I was like, ooh, I was like spitting. I love that. But I'm going to butcher it because they're so like, those animations I think are so neat. And I think it's supposed to be this interesting juxtaposition. And like I said, I think it's a deeper commentary themselves of like, there are these philosophical moments that are so deep that I feel like a lot of it does go over my head. But in particular, it's that interesting juxtaposition. And in a parallel to the show, I think of, right, we can have this deep, meaningful conversation that Cootie himself really latches onto. Like when they first showed it in episode 2, Cootie latched on to the parking delivery guy who spoke volumes about like, yo, I'm saying this like very insightful thing. But then the boing, which I think that's Justin, because I keep seeing Juliette Lewis's name in the credits. I'm like, I guess that's her. I didn't realize that was her. But I saw that last episode or whatever, or the episode before last. No, it was episode 3 I saw that. But I was like, I wasn't sure, but it's like, yeah. That's Juliette Lewis's character, I think. But the boing. But the point is that, you had this very insightful, deep thing, and you had to break it up with like, oh, some slapstick, boing, 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 oh, it's a catchphrase, and you notice it like that in that episode too, where like everyone else was laughing, but like Cootie was almost like, what? Like, oh, I really like that delivery guy, and Flores laughing at the boing yoing yoing, but Cootie wasn't, and he had to kind of laugh, be like, oh, ha 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 ha, because he was really caught up in what the baby was saying, and even I love the little girl being like, I think this baby is the devil, and the guy being like, shut up, Tori. But and then a boing yoing yoing yoing, but like I said, I think it's supposed to be this parallel with the show where it's like, hey, we got some laughs, we got some jokes, but we also have some very serious topics and conversations that we're trying to have, and having these poignant points that we're trying to make as well. But you know, it's just kind of like, but maybe it's also this deeper thing of, I talked about it before, where like, hey, you could have this serious thing, and rather than staying in it, rather than living in it and letting it breathe, you have to break it up with a little bit of comedy. Or, you know, and maybe it's also supposed to be, especially with the flora of it all, supposed to, and, you know, once again, with Scat, Jones, and Felix in episode 2, it's supposed to represent this element of seeing only the surface levels of something rather than seeing the deeper meaning that's there. It's like, oh yeah, the fun and flashy stuff is what captures the general audience, and you miss the deep nuance that is there. Because, but like I said, I think that's supposed to be like a juxtaposition within the confines of Parking Tickets as a show, but I think also a parallel from Parking Tickets to I'm a Virgo as a show as well, you know, so. Because you didn't really get that as much in episode 3 with Scat, when he was watching, like, the news report, like, you know, snow is falling on all of us, that whole element. Like, Scat wasn't, like, laughing, but he was kind of, like, really caught up in it, and obviously his final words being reflective of that. We also had that rash situation, which I didn't talk about last episode, but that is continuing to get worse. I guess it's getting more and more irritated. It's like, what is that a byproduct of? Like, what's happening there? And so, obviously, it's like I said, it's all weighing down on Cootie. The news vilifying him in this way, and especially after 120 days, just will only have TV. And he was so excited about the comics because it's like, hey, the hero who he was in real life isn't who he should be. Who he should be is this version of him in the comics is what's not, is the real version, not who he is out here in real life. But then, like, the most recent issue of the comic has him depicted as the villain and as the monster. And for him, it's like, okay, cool. You want me to be, because also, like, there's so much that he kind of realized of how hypocritical and how much of life is a lie, because the whole, what was the situation? The psychic one being like, oh, Virgos are this, but then he looks at it and she literally says the same thing for every other zodiac sign. So it's like, okay, this is all BS, you know. Because so much of the stuff that was foundational to him, like, he watched TV, he read these books, like, and the comics, like, they were fundamental in his outlook in things, and now he realizes, like, oh, it's all bullshit. Like, the hero is not the person I thought he was, especially after my run-in with him, which is a larger conversation about, you know, it's like, right, a black person, not even handcuffs, chains, and obviously the association with, like, you know, the black community has with chains in our history, especially with this country. So you add that. So yeah, right, the hero thing is bullshit. You kind of, like, held on to the philosophy of, like, this psychic, but now you realize, like, oh, it's regurgitated bullshit that she says about every other Zodiac sign. So it's like, okay, so that's BS. So he ultimately was fed up, and he's telling his mom, like, all right, they want to paint me the villain, then I'll be the fucking villain. She's like, are you cussing at me? He's like, no, I'm not cussing at you, I'm cussing with you. But it's like, I will be the villain that shows them what it's really like to be the hero, which I always think is such an interesting thing, where it's like, right, when you have a bad guy, like, yeah, bad guys can sometimes have a better moral code than heroes, and obviously we've seen that juxtaposition where the bad guy becomes the hero. Like, you know, it's like you have, like, a Megamind situation. How he became the hero in the end. Spoilers for a movie from a couple years ago, but yeah, you know, so that's what kind of immediately comes to mind. And we kind of finally get Martise and I would just always say Francine, but it's like Lil Francine. their circumstances. It's like, right, that he can be the one that changes everything. They were having that conversation again, and finally we figured out what this is all about. It's like, we've been preparing for this day for a while now, because Martise has been working at the company he's been working at for like 28 years, until it was already like it taken piece and piece by him, because of like, yeah, I'm working for this company that takes and steals so much and takes advantage of our community, and I think it's connected to the like light company and stuff like that. So 19 years ago, when Cootie came into their life, he was taking, like Bit said, they were throwing away. Little by little, he was stealing from the company, making him weapons, because they knew one day people would come for him, and so that he had to be ready. Like, they're going to come with guns in hand, so will we. So the gun we saw in episode 1 wasn't for them. That was weaponry they prepared Cootie for this fight that was coming, that he could be the revolutionary. Like, so it does feel like LaFrancine was referencing him when she was talking to Jones, and Jones is the one kind of leading the charge now, but it seems like it's going to be Cootie. This is going to be his battle of like, right, you got to change things. Like, we wanted you ready, but the fight kind of came to you before you were really ready, but we want you to come to this fight on your own. We want you to find something worth fighting for, and we think you found it. So they gave him like all this weaponry that they put together over these years to give him defense, like bringing down the screen stuff, moving secret panels. The beat that Mike Epps is that Martise does, I'm like, is that supposed to be that? Because all I can hear is that God, what's that Ludacris' song actually called? When I move, you move. I don't think that's the title of it, but it's Stand Up. It's the song. But when he does the beat, I was like, I feel like I might have noticed that the first time in episode 1, but this time it sounded even clearer. I was like, is that what that's supposed to be? Is that the beat to Stand Up? It sounds like, because it adds a very very specific, like, that's one of like those like Ludacris bangers that you don't forget about. It's like, once again, you kind of forget like the bangers he's got in his catalog, his discography. Because that was like around middle school when that came out for me. I think I was in middle school when that came out. Either way, that's what it sounded like to me. But maybe that was just me being stupid. Maybe I hear that and someone else. But I heard Stand Up when he was doing the beat to like unlock the panels and stuff like that. But yeah, I even love the little like almost brass knuckles, but they're not brass knuckles. But one has love and one has hate. It's like, all right, I guess we halfwits finally got our mind right. It's like, yo. But also getting back to the point I should say to wrap things up, I guess it also, like, because I had this whole thing of like, right, are they aliens? Like, what are they doing? It's like, no, they're just revolutionaries. They were always waiting for the revolution. And the moment Cootie came into their life, they're like, I know that you're going to be something special. Because maybe it has something to do with his biological mom. Maybe that spark that's in him, that who he could be and has the potential to be, is something connected with her. Because I didn't touch on it, but those cultists did show up too. So I don't know if they're going to play some role in the villainous role that Cootie's going to play as the revolutionary. Because, because being a revolutionary is such an interesting thing, because it is all about perspective. Because, hey, we're freedom fighters, but to other people, you're terrorists. It's like, it is all about perspective. Sometimes it's just hey, you view yourself as a freedom fighter and other people view as your terrorist, but also it could be like that complicated split down the middle, in any capacity. So it definitely feels like that could, they're already vilifying him as the villain. So it's like, why not lean into that and use my villainy for good to show people, right, you might label me as a villain, but I am a hero. This is what a hero should be. This is what a hero should fight for. This is what a hero should stand for, because that's the hero. I'm going to become his arch nemesis, and the roles are going to get reversed, where I'm going to show you he's actually the villain of the story when I'm the hero. But even though the hero's like, I'm the literal hero of this story. So I think that's going to be an interesting element to see. But I wasn't expecting that just to be what Martise and LaFrancine's circumstances. Like I said, I thought like, oh, so like the tech stuff we've seen is just like, yeah, it's just tech they've been stealing from the company. Well, Martise has been stealing from the company for the past 19 years just so they can gear and make stuff for Cootie and this revolution. And like they themselves are just revolutionaries trying to change the way things have been working, and in Oakland, but also just in the world in general. They're trying to change this world and flip it upside down. So definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Only 2 episodes left, so it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see how this all plays out. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.